It's the ultimate form of political censorship, but what happens when an assassin is never brought to justice? Elijah Parish Lovejoy was a newspaper editor, educator, and prominent abolitionist in St. Louis, Missouri during the early 19th century. Lovejoy's newspaper, the St. Louis Observer, was a powerful weapon against the state's ongoing exploitation of enslaved workers. When a local judge failed to bring the white killers of a local black man to trial, Lovejoy's newspaper was openly critical of him. As a result, Lovejoy was forced to flee the city. He settled in Alton, Illinois, where he took over the Alton Observer and used it to continue to campaign for an end to slavery in the face of fierce resistance. In November 1837, a violent mob attacked the building housing Lovejoy's printing press. He was shot and killed attempting to stop the rioters.
The news stunned the nation. A white man had been killed over black slavery.
Though many rioters were indicted for the violence that day, no one was ever brought to justice for Lovejoy's death, nor was the person who fired the gun that killed him ever officially identified. The state of Kentucky was a violent place in the years following the American Civil War, and few politicians of the period illustrate the violence of the times quite like Kentucky Governor William Goebel. Goebel was a lawyer and state senator. During his time in the Senate, he sponsored laws that furthered the Democratic cause at the expense of corporations. He served on the committee that wrote the state constitution and enraged opponents with his skillful exploitation of its laws. He was also a fighter and shot and killed John Sanford, who attacked Goebel for passing laws that dramatically reduced Sanford's profits from road tolls. Goebel ran for governor and was on his way into the State House to observe a vote recount when he was wounded by a sniper firing from a neighboring building. He was ultimately declared the winner of the election and took the oath of office from his deathbed. Goebel served for about 4 days before dying of his wound. 5 men stood trial for the murder, but all 5 were either found not guilty or pardoned, leaving the identity of the actual assassin a matter of speculation. The American frontier produced some memorable characters, including the legendary Wyatt Earp. The biography Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal by Stuart Lake, published 2 years after his death, paints a picture of a fearless lawman with a checkered past who survived countless dangers only to die peacefully at the age of 80. The biography has since been widely discredited, but among the true details is the account of the death of Earp's less fortunate brother, Morgan Earp. Along with a third brother, Virgil, the Earp brothers stood up to local outlaws in the town of Tombstone, Arizona, where a bitter feud with the Ike Clanton gang led to the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. Though all 3 brothers survived the gunfight, Morgan would later be attacked by an unknown assailant during a game of pool. He died from his injuries at the age of 30. An enraged Wyatt rounded up a posse, chased down several outlaws suspected of the murder, and took the law into his own hands. The responsibility for the killing may have been laid with the Clantons and others who were shot and killed by Wyatt's men. It's unknown who actually murdered Morgan Earp. Alex Odeh was a Palestinian immigrant and activist who worked tirelessly as a member of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, known as the ADC, campaign for better treatment for people of Middle Eastern descent in the U.S. The ADC was highly critical of U.S. financial aid to Israel on account of the latter's aggressive foreign policies. This resulted in a feud between the ADC and the Jewish Defense League, or JDL. Odeh, who was a father of 3, was a regular face at the ADC's offices in Santa Ana, California, which became the target of multiple bombings. On October 11, 1985, Odeh was at the office when a bomb exploded, killing him.
I don't have an idea who done it, but as I said in the past, he had received some threatening calls from people identifying themselves as JDL.
In the years since, the FBI has focused on several suspects, but no one has ever been charged with Odeh's murder. A poster asking the public for information about the case still exists on the FBI's website. After the horrific institution of apartheid in South Africa was brought to an end in the mid-1990s, new President Nelson Mandela entrusted Archbishop Desmond Tutu to chair what became known as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The commission was a restorative justice forum detailing the crimes and human rights abuses of the previous decades. Examined in the report are the tragic killings of National Party politician Robert Smit and his wife, Jean-Cora Smit, in mysterious circumstances that have yet to be solved. The couple was killed in a shooting and knife attack in their home in what the report describes as a professional hit. In a strange detail, the words Rao Tem were painted in red at the site of the assassination, but to this day, the meaning of the message remains unclear. Numerous suspects were considered in the brutal deaths, but the commission report concluded that it must have been the work of South African security forces. The report didn't establish a concrete motive. In 2012, Cape Times revealed that they had spoken with a source who claimed the killings were conducted by a Cuban hit squad hired to cover up Robert Smith's discovery of illegal payments from South Africa to U.S. politicians. The case remains open, with a range of theories circulating online as to who exactly was responsible. On May 4, 1978, shots rang out on the streets of the left bank, a bohemian district in the heart of Paris known for attracting left-leaning artists, intellectuals, and activists from all around the world. One of these was Egyptian-born Henri Curiel, who'd been exiled from his home country for leading a prominent communist group. Curiel was shot and killed in the street by what witnesses claimed were two gunmen. The killers quickly fled the scene, leaving no clue to their identities. In the almost 3 decades that he lived in Paris, Curiel had continued his role as a radical and disruptive political activist, working with left-wing groups in Sudan, South Africa, and Algeria. The list of political enemies who may have wanted Curiel dead is long. It's also been theorized that French security services or even the CIA were behind the murder. To this day, his death remains a mystery. Ioan Petru Culianu was a Romanian historian and professor at the Divinity School at the University of Chicago in 1986, where he lectured students on obscure religious sects from the distant past. According to a former student, he was a gregarious, funny, and popular tutor. So, both his students and fellow staff were deeply shocked when in 1991, the 41-year-old Culianu was assassinated with eerie precision in a campus bathroom, a single pistol shot to the back of the head.
It was done on his mother's name day, his saint's day, May 21. I think that's extremely significant.
Though his academic work was initially believed to have been linked to his death, it later emerged that Culianu had been a vocal and prolific critic of the Iliescu regime, which controlled his native Romania at the time.
A campaign of misinformation organized by Iliescu helped to create a climate of terror.
Though it has been widely assumed that the killing was politically motivated, no concrete evidence regarding the identity of the assassin or who sent them has yet come to light. Olof Palme was one of the most successful and recognizable people in Swedish politics in the final decades of the 20th century. He rose to lead the Swedish Social Democratic Workers' Party and twice became the country's prime minister, once from 1969 to 1976, and again from 1982 to 1986. But his second term was cut short. On the evening of February 28, 1986, Olof and his wife Lisbeth were walking home from a Stockholm cinema when a figure came up behind them and shot each in the back. Olof was killed, but Lisbeth survived.
The murder scene was immediately contaminated by mourners laying flowers, one of a string of mistakes that cut the chances of finding the killer.
In 1988, a convicted killer named Christer Pettersson was found guilty of killing Palme, but he was acquitted the following year. As of 2020, 134 different people had confessed to the murder, meaning that for many, the investigation looks like a lost cause. That year, Sweden's chief prosecutor named the long-dead suspect Stig Engström as the likely perpetrator and officially closed the case. However, the passage of time makes it likely that no new information will emerge to back up the circumstantial evidence placing him at the scene. There are many conspiracy theories surrounding the assassination, including that Palme was killed by the Kurdistan Workers' Party or enemies in South Africa. Dele Giwa was hailed as a journalistic hero for his work in his home country of Nigeria. Having received his education in the U.S. and gained vital experience at the New York Times in the late 1970s, Giwa returned to Nigeria, where he became a prominent investigative journalist, uncovering many scandals in the country's corrupt government to the day. He went on to found and become editor-in-chief of the hard-hitting investigative paper Newswatch. But Giwa's stellar career was cut tragically short. On October 19, 1986, a journalist was killed while having breakfast with a friend, Kayode Soyinka, at the former's home in Lagos. The murder weapon was a letter bomb that was brought into the room by Giwa's son. Assuming it was material for Newswatch, Giwa opened it and received the full force of the blast. Giwa had been arrested in the years prior to his death. In fact, his most recent brush with the Nigerian state police occurred just 2 days before the letter bomb killed him.
The state has refused to deal with the matter conclusively, almost bordering on state complicity and so on.
To date, no one has been arrested for the murder. On August 27, 1982, the Turkish military attaché to Canada, Colonel Atilla Altikat, was traveling in his limousine through Ottawa's embassy district when an unknown gunman opened fire, killing him instantly. The 45-year-old's assassination was just the latest in a huge number of targeted attacks against Turkish people from 1973 onwards. The attacks were orchestrated, it was claimed, by one of many Armenian terror groups as a result of ongoing strife between the two nations. A total of 23 people were believed to have lost their lives in the attacks, which targeted Turkish diplomats living and working abroad. While a group calling themselves Justice Commandos for Armenian Genocide claimed responsibility for the assassination, they later merged with other groups and dissolved, meaning that uncovering the identity of Altikat's assassin is now nearly impossible. In 2012, a memorial was unveiled at the site of Altikat's murder, dedicated to the memory of fallen diplomats. Krim Belkacem was an Algerian living in exile in Germany at the time of his death, which took place in a Frankfurt hotel room on October 20, 1970. Belkacem had been the leader of the National Liberation Front, an Algerian revolutionary group fighting French occupation. As such, he'd helped lead a national revolt. But the capture of his allies, the formation of a rival government, and his resulting death sentence for treason forced him to flee the country he'd helped shape. The official report of the killing describes a group of Moroccan men who checked into the hotel and left without paying. It was in one of their rooms that Belkacem's strangled body was discovered. The National Liberation Front blamed the killing on the new Algerian government, but more recently it's been suggested that his death may have been orchestrated by external forces looking to stoke tension in Algeria. Carlo Tresca was an anarchist newspaper owner and political activist who, on the night of January 11, 1943, was shot dead on the streets of New York. He was a radical figure. Born in Italy, Tresca came to America where he established himself as an outspoken critic of fascist and capitalist exploitation, and won many friends with his charisma.
If you want to know what the workers' movement is really about, Agent Flynn, you come to the meeting.
In her book, All the Right Enemies, The Life and Murder of Carlo Tresca, author Dorothy Gallagher quotes Tresca's friend, American writer Max Eastman, as saying, "He was the last of the great revolutionists who fought implacably with love instead of hate in their hearts." His final work, highlighting the hypocrisy of former fascist Italians attempting to carve up political power in the wake of Benito Mussolini, made enemies of movements across the political spectrum, including communist groups. In addition, Tresca attracted the attention of the mafia, some of whom were believed to have had ties to Tresca's enemies in Italy. Although it's never been determined who pulled the trigger on Tresca, journalists have offered a wide range of possible motives and perpetrators. And while many fingers point at mob hoodlum Carmine Galante, he was never arrested, at least not for that.